I felt the ice forming on my eyelashes before I felt the pain. -35 degrees. My own son had just thrown my suitcase into a snowbank and deadbolted the door behind me. I stood on the porch of the house I paid for, watching the lights go dark one by one, but I was not shaking from the cold. I was shaking because I knew exactly what I was about to do. One phone call, one clause, buried on page 19, and by sunrise, he would not even have a mailbox to his name. Welcome, and thank you for being here. If this moment resonated with you, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from. I read every single one. And tell me this, when the people who are supposed to protect you become the ones who hurt you, is silence still loyalty? Or is it suicide? Just a heads up, certain elements ahead are fictionalized for storytelling and educational purposes. Locations and names may differ, but the message is real. It was a Thursday in January. The National Weather Service had issued a polar vortex warning for the entire Twin Cities metro area. -35 degrees Fahrenheit. Do not go outside unless absolutely necessary. Frostbite in under 10 minutes. I read that alert on my phone at 6 in the evening. Sitting in the small basement room my son had assigned me in his 4,000-square-foot colonial revival home in Edina, Minnesota. Even the government knew this cold could kill. My son did not care. The front door slammed at 7:45. Derek was home. I could tell by the weight of his footsteps that he had been drinking. A sober man walks with purpose. A drunk man walks with momentum. Derek had momentum tonight. The kind that breaks things. I heard Megan's voice upstairs. High-pitched. Excited. She always got giddy when Derek came home loaded because it meant he was either going to spend money or start a fight. Both entertained her. I stayed in my room. 18 months had taught me that invisibility meant safety. But tonight, my name came bellowing down the stairwell like a command. Harold, get up here. Now. I picked up my cane. Hickory. Solid. Heavy. My best friend Walt had given it to me 11 months ago. But this cane was more than a walking aid. Inside the carved handle sat a high-definition camera no bigger than a pencil eraser. 64 gigabytes of memory. I pressed the button twice. The tiny red light blinked once inside the seam. Recording. I climbed the stairs. My knees protested in the cold. 45 years I had spent on bridge construction sites across this country. I had poured foundations in North Dakota in January. Welded beams in Alaska in December. I was 72 years old, and I was not afraid of cold. But I was afraid of what waited at the top of those stairs. Derek stood in the kitchen. Tie loosened. Face flushed. A tumbler of whiskey in his hand. With that glazed, dangerous look I had come to recognize. Megan stood behind him near the island, her phone angled slightly toward me. She always had it ready. She liked recording things. Sit down, Derek said. We need to talk. I did not sit. I leaned on my cane. What is it, son? He slammed the glass on the granite. Whiskey sloshed over the rim. The fund is bleeding, Dad. 3 clients gone this week. Do you understand the pressure I am under? I am sorry to hear that, I said. But I am not sure what that has to do with me. Everything. You are down there eating my food, using my heat, draining my resources. You are dead weight. You contribute nothing. Megan's lips curled behind him. She was enjoying this. Derek, you took my pension deposit 14 months ago. I have nothing left to give. Wrong answer. Truth was always the wrong answer with Derek. He crossed the distance in 3 steps. Grabbed my flannel shirt. Bourbon breath hot on my face. Sign the power of attorney. Sign it and I handle everything. You never think about money again. No, I said. His grip tightened against my neck. You stubborn old fool. You think because you built bridges 40 years ago that means something? You are nothing. Dead weight in my house. Megan floated forward. Just throw him out, babe. It is freezing. He will come crawling back in an hour, begging to sign anything. Something shifted in Derek's eyes. The calculation of a predator weighing cost against reward. He released my shirt, walked to the hallway closet, pulled out my suitcase and began stuffing my coat, boots, and belongings inside with violent hands. He zipped it, walked to the front door, threw it open. The wind hit the entryway like a freight train. Papers flew. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in 3 seconds. He hurled my suitcase into the drift. It landed with a muffled thud, half buried against the porch railing. Then he grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into the muscle above my elbow. He dragged me toward the open door. I did not fight. I let him move me. The cane was in my other hand. The red light was blinking. "You are dead weight," he said again. "Get out, or I drag you by your hair." He shoved me through the doorway. The cold was instantaneous. Absolute. A wall of needles against my face. My lungs seized. Megan appeared behind him. She looked at my cane braced against the doorframe. She picked it up and tossed it into the snow beside my suitcase. "Do not forget your stick, old man." Then she laughed. The door slammed. The deadbolt clicked. A small metallic sound. Final. Like a pin pulled from a grenade. I stood on the porch wearing a flannel shirt, corduroy pants, and wool socks. No coat. No gloves. No hat. 35 below zero. The wind screamed across the flat suburban landscape carrying ice crystals that cut my skin like tiny razors. The lights inside went dark. Living room. Kitchen. Hallway. Upstairs bedroom. One by one. They were going to sleep. They were going to lie in a warm bed while their 72-year-old father froze to death 3 feet from the front door. I looked at the dark windows. I looked at my suitcase buried in snow. I looked at my cane lying in the drift. Its tiny light, still blinking red. And I smiled. The first real smile in 18 months. Because standing in that killing cold, I was finally free. Free to act. Free to destroy. Free to activate the thing I had buried deeper than any foundation I had ever poured. They thought they were throwing out an old man. They were wrong. They were releasing an engineer. And an engineer does not just know how to build. He knows exactly where to place the charges when it is time to bring the whole structure down. Hypothermia does not announce itself. It creeps. It whispers. It tells you that the cold is not so bad after all. That maybe you should just sit down for a moment. Just rest your eyes. That whisper is death wearing a lullaby. I made it 4 blocks before my legs stopped cooperating. The wind was coming from the northwest at 40 miles per hour, driving the snow sideways in sheets so thick I could not see the street signs. My flannel shirt was frozen stiff against my chest. My fingers had stopped hurting 10 minutes ago, which meant they were dying. I knew the science. I had built bridges in conditions like this. When the pain stops, the tissue is surrendering. My cane was the only thing keeping me vertical. I stabbed it into the snow with each step, using it as an anchor against the gusts that tried to knock me sideways. The suitcase was gone. I had abandoned it 2 blocks back when my right hand lost all sensation. It did not matter. Everything I truly needed was in the handle of this cane and in the phone buried deep in my left pants pocket, pressed against my thigh where the last of my body heat was concentrated. I was counting steps. An engineer counts. It is what we do. We measure loads and tolerances and breaking points. At step 312, my left knee buckled. I went down hard onto the sidewalk. The impact sent a jolt through my hip that should have been agonizing, but the cold had already numbed everything below my waist. I tried to stand. My arms shook. I made it to one knee before the wind slammed me back down. This is how it ends, I thought. Not in a hospital bed. Not surrounded by family. Face down on a frozen sidewalk in Edina, Minnesota, 3 blocks from a house full of people who wanted me dead. I do not know how long I lay there. It could have been 2 minutes. It could have been 20. Time loses meaning when your core temperature drops below 95 degrees. I remember the snow piling on my back. I remember the sound of the wind becoming quieter, which meant my hearing was shutting down. I remember thinking about Ruth, my wife, wondering if she was waiting for me somewhere warm. Then I heard barking. Sharp, insistent, close. A dog. A small one. By the pitch. And then a voice. Human. Female. Panicked. Oh my God. Oh my God. Is that a person? Hello? Can you hear me? Hands on my shoulders. Strong hands. Rolling me over. A face appeared above me, framed by a fur-lined hood and a cloud of frozen breath. Sandra Kovacs. My neighbor from 3 houses down. Former emergency room nurse. 55 years old. She had lived on Elm Court for 20 years. And she was the only person on that street who still waved at me when I checked the mail. Harold? Harold Mercer? Her voice was shaking. What are you doing out here? Where is your coat? I tried to speak. My jaw was locked. My lips would not form words. All that came out was a rattling sound from somewhere deep in my chest. She did not wait for an answer. She hooked her arms under mine and dragged me. I am not a small man. 6'1", 190 pounds, even at 72. But Sandra was strong in the way that nurses are strong. She had spent 30 years lifting patients twice her size. She hauled me across the snow, up her driveway, and through her front door in under 4 minutes. The warmth hit me like an electric shock. Every nerve ending that had gone silent suddenly screamed back to life. The pain was extraordinary. My hands felt like they were being crushed in a vice. My face burned. My feet were 2 blocks of ice sending lightning bolts up my shins. Sandra was already moving. She stripped my frozen shirt off and wrapped me in heated blankets from her dryer. She put my hands in bowls of lukewarm water. She checked my pupils with a penlight. She was calm, clinical, professional. She had done this before. Harold, stay with me. Can you hear me? How long were you out there? I do not know, I managed. My voice was a croak. 45 minutes. Maybe more, she swore under her breath. At this temperature that is beyond critical, I need to call an ambulance. No, I said. The word came out harder than I intended. No, hospital. She stared at me. Harold, you could have frostbite. Your core temperature is dangerously low. You need medical attention. I looked at her. My vision was still blurry, but I could see the concern on her face. More than concern. I could see the question forming behind her eyes. The question she was too polite to ask directly. I answered it for her. My son threw me out, Sandra. He threw me out into the storm because I would not sign over my pension. Her face changed. The clinical mask slipped. Underneath was something harder. Something angry. She looked at my wrists. I saw her eyes lock onto the yellowing bruises that peeked above the blanket. Old bruises. Weeks old. From the last time Derek had grabbed me. How long, she whispered. How long has this been happening? 18 months, I said. And I have every single day of it recorded. Her eyes went wide. She looked at my cane, which she had carried in, and propped against the wall by the door. The red light had finally stopped blinking. The memory card was full. 64 gigabytes of evidence. 212 separate incidents of abuse, captured in high definition. I need my phone, I said. Left pocket, my pants. She retrieved it. My fingers were still too stiff to work the screen, so she held it for me. I told her the number. She dialed. It rang once. Walt Brennan picked up before the second ring. He always did when I called past midnight. Harold? His voice was alert. Not sleepy. Walt was a night owl. 78 years old, and still sharper than men, half his age. What happened? Talk to me. It is time, Walt, I said. My voice was thin but steady. Page 19. Silence on the line. 3 seconds. 5. I could hear Walt breathing. I could hear the weight of what I was asking settling onto his shoulders. Harold, are you certain? Page 19 is a one-way door. Once I file, there is no reversal, no negotiation, no second chances. Everything transfers within 12 hours. He threw me outside, Walt. 35 below. No coat. I almost died on the sidewalk. Sandra Kovacs found me. I am at her house now. I have the whole thing recorded. 18 months of it. Another silence. Then Walt's voice came back different. Colder. The voice of the attorney, not the friend. I will have the paperwork filed by 7 in the morning, Walt said. By noon, your son will be a trespasser in his own living room. I am activating the full clause, Harold. House, accounts, everything connected to the trust. Do you understand what that means? I understand, I said. Good. Now get warm. Do not call Derek. Do not text him. Do not give him any warning. Let him go to work tomorrow, thinking everything is normal. Let him sit at his desk, believing he still has a kingdom, and then let him come home to ashes. I hung up. I looked at the clock on Sandra's kitchen wall. 2:14 in the morning. Derek had less than 12 hours left in paradise. He was sleeping in my house right now, in my bed, under my roof, dreaming of my money. I closed my eyes. Not to sleep. To count. Let me take you back. Before the blizzard. Before the basement room. Before my son became a stranger, wearing a familiar face. Let me show you how an engineer ends up freezing on a sidewalk in a suburb he helped pay for. I spent 45 years designing bridges for the Federal Highway Administration. Not the Golden Gate variety. The unglamorous kind. The overpass on Interstate 94 that carries 60,000 cars a day. The span over the Mississippi near Red Wing that took 3 winters to complete. The pedestrian crossing in Duluth that survived a flood that wiped out everything else on the riverbank. I built things that held. That was my entire identity. Harold Mercer builds things that hold. Ruth was the same way. 41 years of marriage, and she never once cracked under pressure. She was a middle school teacher. 7th grade science. She handled 30 teenagers, hopped up on hormones and sugar 5 days a week, with more patience than I ever showed a steel beam. She was the foundation of everything I was. When she got the diagnosis, pancreatic cancer, stage 4, I remember sitting in the oncologist's office, thinking this is the one load I cannot engineer my way out of. She lasted 9 months. She was brave every single day of it. She never complained. She never asked why me. She just held my hand and told me to keep building. The last thing she said to me, 3 hours before she passed, was, "Do not stop, Harold. Promise me. You will not just sit in this house and wait to follow me." I promised. But I did sit. For 6 months after the funeral, I sat in our little rambler in Roseville, and I stared at the walls she had painted and the garden she had planted, and I felt the structure of my life developing cracks I could not repair. That is when Derek called. "Dad, come live with us. You should not be alone. We have plenty of room. Megan and I want you close. We worry about you." It sounded like love. It looked like love. I wanted it to be love so badly that I ignored the engineering instinct that told me to check the foundation before moving in. Derek was 36 at the time. He ran a small investment fund called Summit Ridge Capital out of a glass office in the IDS Tower downtown. He wore tailored suits and drove a German sedan and spoke in the language of quarterly returns and basis points. He looked successful. But I knew construction. I knew how to spot a hairline fracture in a foundation before the building collapses. And something about Derek's success always felt thin, like a veneer over particle board. Pretty to look at, dangerous to lean on. Still, I sold the Roseville house. I moved into the Colonial Revival in Edina. It was a beautiful home. 4,000 square feet, 6 bedrooms, a 3-car garage. Derek told me he had purchased it 5 years ago with his fund bonuses. I had no reason to doubt him at the time. But here is the thing about me. Ruth used to say I was the only man she knew who read the warranty on a toaster. She was right. I read everything. I question everything. I stress test everything. It is not paranoia. It is engineering. 10 years before I moved in with Derek, when my portfolio was at its peak and my health was still strong, I sat down with Walt Brennan and we designed something. Not a bridge. A trust. An irrevocable trust that would hold the bulk of my assets, including a significant real estate investment that I will explain later. Walt and I spent 4 months drafting it. We modeled it after the kinds of structures I had spent my career building. Redundant systems, fail-safes, load-bearing clauses that would activate automatically if certain conditions were met. We were not planning for Derek specifically. We were planning for the possibility that power corrupts and money corrupts. Absolutely. And blood does not make a man immune to either. The trust held the Adina house. Not Derek's name. Not Megan's name. The trust. And within the trust, on page 19 of a 43-page document, was a clause Walt and I called the load release. In bridge engineering, a load release is a mechanism that allows a structure to shed weight before it collapses. When the stress exceeds the design tolerance, the release activates, and the excess load is jettisoned. The bridge survives. The load does not. Page 19 stated this. If any permitted occupant of the trust property commits physical violence, verbal abuse, financial exploitation, or any act that violates the duty of care owed to the grantor, the occupancy license is immediately and automatically revoked without notice, without cure period, and without judicial intervention. All trust assets transfer to the designated successor entity within 12 hours of documented violation. No court. No eviction filing. No 30-day notice. No negotiation. Immediate transfer. The bridge sheds the load, or the bridge collapses. I chose the bridge. When Derek invited me to move in, I had Walt prepare an updated occupancy agreement. Standard looking. Boring. 12 pages of legal language that any normal person would skim. Derek signed it at the kitchen table while Megan poured champagne. He did not read past page 3. He was too busy calculating how much my pension would supplement his lifestyle. He never noticed the clause on page 19. He never noticed that the house was owned by the Mercer Family Irrevocable Trust. He never noticed that the successor entity was a company called Northland Asset Group, managed by Walt's associate Victor Haynes. He never noticed any of it, because Derek never read the fine print. He was a man who looked at the surface and assumed the foundation was solid. He was the kind of man who buys a house without checking the basement for cracks. I moved in believing that love would be enough, that the clause would never be needed, that it was just insurance, the same way a bridge has earthquake dampers it never uses. It took exactly 3 months for me to realize I was wrong. 3 months for Derek to show me what lived beneath the veneer. 3 months for the first crack to appear, and 18 months for the earthquake to finally arrive. The first 3 months were almost beautiful. I will give them that. Derek and Megan played the part of devoted family with the precision of stage actors who had rehearsed their lines. Dinners together. Sunday brunches. Megan even asked me to teach her how to make Ruth's pot roast recipe. I taught her. She never made it again after the 3rd month. The shift was not sudden. Abuse never is. It is not a light switch. It is a dimmer. Someone turns it down so slowly that you do not notice the room getting darker until you are sitting in the black wondering when the sun set. Month 4. Derek suggested I move from the upstairs guest room to the smaller room in the basement. For your comfort, Dad. The stairs are hard on your knees. We worry about you falling. It sounded reasonable. Caring. Even. The basement room was half the size, had one window at ground level, and smelled of laundry detergent from the machines on the other side of the wall. But I told myself he was right about the stairs. I moved my things downstairs without argument. Month 5. Megan implemented what she called a kitchen schedule. The upstairs kitchen, the main one with the gas range and the island and the natural light, was reserved for her meal prep between 6 in the morning and 9 at night. I was welcome to use the small utility sink and the mini fridge in the basement. For convenience, she said. So you do not have to climb the stairs every time you want a snack. I was being funneled, contained, reduced. The house was 4,000 square feet, and my world was shrinking to a 12 by 14 room with a concrete floor and a window that showed nothing but snow. Month 6. I came upstairs one Tuesday morning to collect the mail. I always collected the mail. It was my small daily ritual. The walk to the mailbox. The cold air. The feeling of being part of the outside world. Derek was standing at the kitchen counter with my bank statement in his hand. Already opened. "Dad," he said without looking up, "I have been thinking. It makes more sense for your pension to deposit directly into our household account. That way I can manage the bills, the groceries, your medications. You do not need to worry about it. I have managed my own finances for 50 years, Derek." He looked up. His eyes were flat. Not angry yet. Just flat. Like a man who had already decided the outcome of the conversation and was annoyed that I had not arrived at it yet. "Dad, you are 72. You forget things. Last week you left the stove on. I am just trying to help." I did not leave the stove on. Megan had left the stove on and blamed me in front of Derek. I knew it. She knew it. But I could not prove it. And Derek would never believe me over her. "I will think about it," I said. He did not ask again. He did not need to. 3 weeks later, I checked my bank account online and found that my pension direct deposit had been rerouted. $4,200 a month, now flowing into an account I did not have access to. Derek had forged the redirect paperwork. He had my social security number. He had copies of my identification from when I moved in. He had everything he needed. I stared at the screen for a long time. The numbers were not just numbers. They were 45 years of frozen mornings and aching backs and missed holidays. They were the physical cost of my labor converted into digits, and my son had taken them the way a pickpocket takes a wallet. Quietly, without even the courtesy of violence, that night, I called Walt from the basement. I whispered into the phone at 2 in the morning with the washing machine running for cover noise. "He is redirecting my pension, Walt. $4,200 a month." He forged the deposit form. Walt was quiet for a moment. "Do you want me to activate the clause now?" "No," I said. "Not yet. I need more. I need the full picture. If I trigger it now, he will claim it was a misunderstanding. A clerical error. He will hire a lawyer and drag it through court for years. I need the kind of evidence that no judge can dismiss." "You need the pattern," Walt said. "I need the pattern," I confirmed. Walt sighed. "Then I have something for you. Your birthday is next week. I am sending you a gift. A cane. Hickory. Custom made. Beautiful piece of craftsmanship. And Harold, when you get it, press the button on the top of the handle twice." "What does it do, Walt?" "It sees everything," he said. 64 gigabytes. High definition. 180-degree lens. Records continuously for up to 14 hours on a single charge. Uploads to a secure cloud server every night when connected to Wi-Fi. "You built me a weapon," I said. "I built you a witness," Walt corrected. "The most reliable witness in the world. One that never blinks and never forgets." The cane arrived the following Tuesday in a plain brown box. I unwrapped it in my basement room with the door locked. It was beautiful. Dark hickory with a silver band around the neck. Perfectly weighted. The camera lens was invisible to the naked eye, hidden within the carved pattern of the handle. I pressed the button twice. A tiny red light blinked once inside the seam. Visible only if you knew exactly where to look. From that day forward, The cane went everywhere I went. Upstairs, downstairs, to the mailbox, to the kitchen, to every confrontation, to every humiliation. It stood beside me like a silent sentinel, recording the slow erosion of my dignity in crystal clear high definition. I did not know then how many incidents it would capture before the earthquake finally came. I did not know it would take 9 more months of escalation before the physical violence began. But I knew one thing with the certainty of a man who had spent his life calculating breaking points. The cane arrived on a Tuesday. My son had signed his own eviction notice without knowing it. All that remained was collecting enough weight to trigger the release. Month 10 was when Derek's hands learned a new language. It started small. A shove past me in the hallway when I was moving too slowly. A grab of my arm to pull me out of his path when he was late for work. Contact that could be dismissed as impatience, carelessness. But I knew the difference. I had worked with men my entire career. I knew the difference between a man who bumps you by accident and a man who touches you to remind you that he can. The first real hit came on a Sunday. I had come upstairs to use the bathroom because the basement toilet was backed up, and I had asked Derek 3 times to call a plumber. He was watching football. Megan was out. I walked past the living room doorway. "I told you to use the downstairs bathroom," he said without looking away from the screen. "It is broken, Derek." "I told you Thursday." He stood up. He crossed the room. He grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. His palm connected with the side of my face. Not a punch. A slap. Open-handed. The kind of strike designed not to injure, but to humiliate. To remind you of your position in the hierarchy. "Stay downstairs," he said. His voice was calm, almost bored. Then he sat back down and turned up the volume. I stood in the hallway. My cheek burned. My cane was in my left hand. The red light was blinking. I walked back to the basement. I did not say a word. I added it to the count. Incident number 47. After that, the physical contact became routine. A shove when dinner was not ready on his schedule. A grab of my collar when I asked about my pension. A slap when I mentioned calling Walt or any friend from my old life. He was training me, the way you train an animal. Negative reinforcement until the behavior is eliminated. Month 12. Prike. Derek confiscated my car keys. The old Buick was in the garage, but I was no longer permitted to drive it. "Too dangerous, Dad. Your reflexes are not what they used to be. I will drive you anywhere you need to go." He never drove me anywhere. The car sat in the garage collecting dust, while I sat in my basement collecting evidence. Month 13. Megan hosted a dinner party. 12 guests. Colleagues of Derek from the financial sector and their polished wives. I was not invited to attend, but I came upstairs to get water and walked through the edge of the dining room. Megan spotted me. She smiled. That razor-thin smile that meant cruelty was coming dressed as humor. "Oh, everyone. This is Harold, Derek's father. He lives in the basement." She laughed. "It is like having a troll under the bridge." The table laughed. 12 people. 12 strangers laughing at a 72-year-old man in his own house. Derek laughed loudest of all. I filled my glass of water. I walked back downstairs. Incident number 89. The cane recorded their laughter. It recorded the way Derek did not defend me. It recorded Megan's smirk as I retreated. Month 14. Derek cut my phone plan. I discovered it when I tried to call Walt and got a disconnected message. Derek had removed me from the family plan without telling me. I was offline, isolated. No phone. No car. No money. No contact with the outside world. But Derek did not know about the cane's Wi-Fi upload function. Every night, while the house slept, my cane connected to the home network and transmitted the day's footage to Walt's secure server. I did not need to call Walt. The cane spoke for me. Every night. It told him everything. Month 15 was when I almost broke. Not because of what Derek did to me, but because of what he did to Lily. Lily was 9 years old, Derek's daughter from his first marriage. His first wife, Caroline, had left him 4 years ago. After discovering his gambling debts, she was a good woman. Quiet, honest. She worked as a dental hygienist in Maple Grove and raised Lily in a small apartment on a nurse's budget. Derek had visitation every other weekend. He did not exercise it often. Lily was not useful to him. She could not make him money or enhance his image. But every other Saturday when she did come, she would find me in the basement. She would sit on the edge of my bed and tell me about school, about her dog, about the book she was reading. She called me Grandpa. She was the only person in that house who said my name with warmth. One Saturday, I heard her crying upstairs. I went up. Derek was standing over her. She had accidentally spilled juice on his laptop keyboard. Do you know how much that costs? He was screaming at a 9-year-old. Do you know how stupid you are? You are just like your mother. Useless. Lily was shaking. Her face was red and wet. She saw me on the stairs and reached her arms toward me. Grandpa, I stepped forward. Derek. She is a child. It was an accident. He turned on me. His eyes were wild. Do not tell me how to raise my kid, old man. Get back downstairs before I put you there myself. I looked at Lily. She was staring at me with those big brown eyes, begging me to help her. And I could not. If I intervened, he would ban her visits entirely. He had threatened it before. If I triggered the clause now, the custody arrangement would give him grounds to restrict access further during the legal battle. I needed to wait. I needed the pattern to be complete. I went back downstairs. Incident 131. I sat on my bed, and I gripped that cane until my knuckles turned white. That was the night I almost called Walt and ended it. But I did not, because the engineer in me knew that if I detonated the charges too early, the structure would not collapse cleanly. Debris would fly in unpredictable directions. Lily could get hit, so I waited. I endured. I counted. 212 incidents over 18 months. Each one cataloged, each one time-stamped, each one uploaded to Walt's server in the cloud, where Derek could never reach it. I was building a case the same way I built bridges. One beam at a time. One rivet at a time. Patient. Methodical. Unshakable. And every single night, the tiny red light in my cane blinked in the darkness of my basement room. Watching. Recording. Waiting for the earthquake that would finally justify bringing the whole structure down. January 17th. I will remember that date the way engineers remember bridge collapses. The Silver Bridge in 1967. The I-35W in 2007. You study the failures to understand the forces that caused them. You trace the fracture back to its origin point. January 17th was my origin point. The night the last rivet failed, I knew something was wrong before Derek came home. The signs had been building all week. He was staying later at the office. Coming home with his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Checking his phone every 3 minutes with the look of a man waiting for test results he already knows will be bad. Megan had been quiet too. Not her usual performative cruelty. A different kind of quiet. The quiet of a woman who senses the ship listing and is calculating the location of the lifeboats. That Thursday morning, I was in my basement room when I heard Derek on a phone call upstairs. The heating vents carried sound between floors. He did not know that. Or he did not care. What do you mean they are pulling out? His voice was strained. Thin. 3 clients? All 3? That is $9 million in assets under management. Gone. What did they say? What reason did they give? Silence. Then a crash. Something glass. Against something hard. Get on the phone with every remaining client. Do not let them talk to each other. If this becomes a stampede, we are finished. Do you hear me? Finished. Summit Ridge Capital was bleeding. I did not know the full picture then. But I would learn later that Derek's fund had been underperforming for 2 consecutive years. He had been hiding losses with creative accounting, the kind that attracts SEC attention if anyone looks closely enough. 3 major clients had simultaneously requested full redemptions. In the fund world, that is not a setback. That is the first domino. He left for work at 8:30 without speaking to me. Normal. He returned at 7:45. Abnormal. He usually worked until 9 or 10. Coming home early meant the office had become unbearable. It meant the walls were closing in, and he needed to find someone smaller than him to push against. I heard the front door slam. I heard the liquor cabinet open. I heard 2 glasses poured in rapid succession. I heard Megan's heels clicking across the hardwood toward him. Their voices were low, murmuring. Then his voice rose. "I do not want to hear about your spa appointment, Megan. I am drowning. I am actually drowning. And you want to talk about hot stones." She said something I could not hear. His response was clear. "Where is he? Where is the old man?" My stomach tightened. I picked up my cane, pressed the button twice. Red light. Recording. I checked the charge. 83%. More than enough. "Harold, get up here. Now." I climbed the stairs for what I knew might be the last time as a resident of this house. I did not know that consciously, but my body knew it. The way an animal knows when the atmosphere changes before a storm. Every step felt deliberate, heavy with finality. The kitchen was bright. Too bright. Megan had turned on every light. Derek stood in the center of the room, backlit like a figure on a stage. His face was flushed, crimson. His eyes were glassy from the whiskey he had consumed in the 11 minutes since walking through the door. 2 empty glasses on the counter. He was pouring a third. "Sit down," he commanded. I did not sit. I leaned on my cane. What followed was not a conversation. It was a sentencing. Derek paced. He ranted about the fund, about the clients leaving, about the pressure, about how everything was falling apart. And then, like a river finding the lowest ground, his rage flowed downhill toward me. "I need that pension redirected permanently. Not month to month. Permanently. And I need access to whatever else you have hidden away. The retirement accounts. The savings. All of it. I know you have more than you let on, Dad. I am not stupid. I have nothing hidden, Derek. You took my pension 14 months ago. There is nothing else." "Liar," he spat. "You worked for the government for 45 years. You have a federal pension, savings bonds. Something. Where is it?" I looked at him. My son. My only child. The boy I had taught to ride a bicycle in the driveway of our Roseville house. The teenager I had driven to hockey practice at 5 in the morning. The young man I had helped through business school. All of that was gone now. Replaced by this sweating, trembling creature who looked at me and saw only a locked vault. "There is nothing, Derek. I live on Social Security and the pension you already took. That is it. Then sign the power of attorney." He pulled a document from his briefcase on the counter, slammed it down. "Sign this, and I manage everything. Your Social Security, your medical decisions, all of it. You will not have to think about anything ever again." I looked at the document. I looked at him. I thought about Ruth. I thought about Lily. I thought about page 19. "No," I said. The word hung in the air between us. Small, quiet, absolute. His face changed. The frustration twisted into something darker, something primal. He was not my son in that moment. He was a cornered animal who had just been told the cage door was locked. What happened next? You already know. The grab, the shove, the suitcase, the porch, the deadbolt, the killing cold. But what you do not know is what I was thinking in that final moment when Derek's hand was on my chest, pushing me through the doorway into -35 degrees. I was not thinking about survival. I was not thinking about the cold. I was thinking about page 19. I was thinking about the red light blinking in my cane. I was thinking, thank you, Derek. You just gave me everything I needed. 18 months of patience. 212 incidents. And now the crown jewel. Caught in high definition. A 72-year-old man. Thrown into a lethal blizzard by his own son. Attempted murder by exposure. No jury on earth would call that a family dispute. The earthquake had arrived. And I was the only one who knew the building was already falling. I need to explain page 19. Not the legalese. The architecture. When Walt and I designed the trust 10 years ago, we did not write a contract. We built a machine with one function, to protect me from the one threat I prayed would never materialize, but was too smart to ignore. The threat of my own blood turning against me. An irrevocable trust is not like a will. A will is a wish. It can be contested, delayed, manipulated. An irrevocable trust is a structure. Once it is built, even the person who created it cannot easily tear it down. The assets inside belong to the trust, not to any individual. And the trust operates according to its own internal rules, written at the time of creation, enforced automatically upon trigger. Our trust held the Adena house, 3 investment accounts, and a life insurance policy. Derek was listed as the primary beneficiary, meaning he would inherit everything upon my death, provided he met certain conditions. But beneficiary is not owner. That distinction was the foundation of everything. Page 19 contained the load release clause. Walt had modeled it after something called an acceleration clause in mortgage law. When a borrower violates specific terms, the full balance becomes due immediately. No grace period. No negotiation. Instant consequence. Our version worked like this. The trust property was occupied by Derek under a conditional license. That license required him to maintain a duty of care toward me, the grantor. Duty of care was defined broadly and specifically. No physical harm. No verbal abuse. No financial exploitation. No isolation from medical care or social contact. No actions that endanger the grantor's physical safety. If any of these conditions were violated, and if documentation existed to prove the violation, the license terminated automatically. Not in 30 days. Not after a court hearing. Immediately. Within 12 hours of the trustee receiving documented proof, all trust assets would transfer to the designated successor entity. In our case, that was Northland Asset Group, a property management company run by Victor Haynes, Walt's former law partner. Derek could not fight it in court because he was not the owner. He was a licensee. He had signed the occupancy agreement. He had agreed to the terms. The fact that he did not read them was his problem, not mine. Contract law does not require comprehension. It requires a signature. And Derek's signature was on page 43, right above the notary stamp. That was the machine Walt and I had built. Cold, precise, irreversible. Like a bridge that drops its roadway when the supports fail. The bridge survives. The traffic does not. Now, sitting in Sandra's kitchen at 2:30 in the morning with ice packs on my wrists and a blanket around my shoulders, I listened as Walt walked me through the execution. His voice was calm, methodical, the voice of a man who had waited 10 years for a phone call he hoped would never come. "I have the cloud footage from tonight downloading now," Walt said. The camera captured the entire altercation. The shove, the verbal threats, the ejection into lethal weather conditions. Combined with the 18 months of prior documentation, this is more than sufficient to trigger the clause. "How fast?" I asked. "I filed the violation notice with myself as trustee at 7 a.m. when the county recorder opens. The transfer paperwork is already drafted. Has been for 10 years. I just need to insert today's date and attach the evidence packet. By 9 a.m., The trust will have formally transferred the property to Northland Asset Group. By 10 a.m., Victor will have a team on site to secure the premises and change the locks. What about Derek's things inside? I asked. Walt paused. Legally, once the transfer is complete, any personal property left on the premises belongs to the new owner. Standard language. Victor's team will give any occupant 60 minutes to collect identification and medications. Everything else remains. I sat with that. 60 minutes. 2 years of Megan's shopping addiction condensed into 60 minutes and a carry-on bag. It was brutal. It was proportional. What about the pension redirect? I asked. The financial exploitation. Separate matter, Walt said. I have already flagged it for the county prosecutor's office. Elder financial abuse is a felony in Minnesota. But that is phase 2. Phase 1 is the house. Get him out first. Strip the foundation. Then we bring the hammer. I nodded, even though he could not see me. What about his fund? I asked. Walt went quiet for a moment. I could hear him thinking, choosing his words. Harold, are you asking me about Bridgewater Silent Partners? Yes. You want to pull the investment. I want to pull it tomorrow, I said. I want the redemption notice on his desk by Friday afternoon. I want him to come home from losing 60% of his fund's capital to find out he does not have a home to come back to. Walt exhaled slowly. That is a $2.1 million withdrawal, Harold. You understand you will likely trigger a fund collapse. Other investors will panic and redeem. He could lose everything. His license, his career, potentially face SEC investigation if his books do not balance. I know, I said, and you are comfortable with that. I touched my face. The left side was still swollen from the last time Derek hit me, 6 days before the blizzard. A backhand across the jaw while I was eating soup. The cane had captured it. Incident 209. Walt, I said. My son threw me into a polar vortex tonight. He told me to die. He told me I was dead weight. He has been stealing from me for 14 months. He hits me. He screams at my granddaughter. He locks me in a basement. And tonight he tried to kill me with the weather. I paused. I let the silence fill the space between us. Am I comfortable? No. But I am certain. There is a difference. Walt cleared his throat. Redemption notice will be filed at market open. Standard processing means the funds leave his account within 24 hours. By Friday close of business, Summit Ridge Capital will be insolvent. I closed my eyes. 2 demolitions. Synchronized. One taking the roof. One taking the career. Both detonating on the same day. Friday. Less than 16 hours away. I thought about Derek sleeping upstairs in the Adina house right now. Warm. Comfortable. Certain that the old man was either dead in a snowbank or crawling back to beg. He would wake up tomorrow morning. He would kiss his wife. He would drive to work. He would sit at his desk. And he would have no idea that the ground beneath him had already been removed. You should sleep. Walt said gently. I will. I lied. I hung up. I looked at Sandra's kitchen clock. 2:51 a.m. The countdown was running. And for the first time in 18 months, I was the one holding the detonator, but the house was only the first domino. Let me tell you about the second. 5 years ago, when Derek launched Summit Ridge Capital, he invited me to invest. It was a Sunday dinner. Ruth had just passed. I was still in the fog of grief. Derek had prepared a presentation, slides on his laptop, projections, charts with upward curves that looked like promises. Dad, he said, leaning forward with the intensity of a man closing a deal. I am building something real. A boutique fund specializing in mid-cap growth equities. I have 3 anchor investors committed. I need 1 more to hit my minimum threshold for SEC registration. $2 million gets you in on the ground floor. You will see 15% annually. Minimum. I looked at my son across the dinner table. He was 33 years old. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He had confidence coming off him like cologne. And I thought about Ruth, about her last words. "Do not stop building, Harold." I said no. His face fell. "Dad, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I am your son. You do not trust me?" "I trust you, Derek," I said. "But I do not mix family and finance. It is a rule I have had for 50 years. He left angry that night. He did not call me for 3 weeks. But I was not finished. I was just not doing it his way. The following Monday, I called Walt. "I want to invest in Derek's fund," I said. "But I do not want him to know it is me." Walt was quiet for a moment. "Why?" "Because if he knows his father is watching, he will perform. He will hide things. I want to see who he really is when he thinks nobody is looking. And because if something goes wrong, I want the ability to act without him seeing it coming." Walt understood. He was a trust and estate attorney. He had seen families destroy each other over money for 40 years. He knew that transparency is not always wisdom. Sometimes the safest position is the one nobody can see. We created Bridgewater Silent Partners, a limited liability company registered in Delaware. Walt was the listed managing member. My name appeared nowhere in the public filings. We routed the investment through 2 intermediary accounts to create distance. When the wire hit Derek's fund account, it came from a faceless entity in Wilmington with a generic name and a voicemail box. $2.1 million. It represented 60% of Summit Ridge Capital's total initial capitalization. Derek had his anchor investor. He just did not know it was the same man he would one day throw into a snowstorm. For the first 3 years, the fund performed adequately. Not the 15% Derek had promised, but a respectable 8 to 10. I received quarterly statements through Walt. I reviewed them the way I reviewed bridge stress reports, looking for anomalies, looking for cracks. Year 4 is when the cracks appeared. The quarterly returns started diverging from the benchmark indices in ways that did not make mathematical sense. Derek was reporting gains in quarters where the broader market was down. Not impossible, but improbable for a mid-cap equity fund without significant hedging positions. I flagged it to Walt. "Either he is a genius," Walt said, "or he is smoothing the numbers." "He is not a genius," I said. Walt engaged a forensic accountant. Quietly. The accountant reviewed the public filings, the investor letters, and the limited performance data available. His conclusion was careful, but damning. The fund appears to be engaging in selective reporting. Gains are highlighted. Losses are deferred to subsequent quarters or absorbed into operational expenses. This is not necessarily illegal, but it is on the border of misrepresentation. It was not a Ponzi scheme. Derek was not stealing money directly. He was doing something almost worse. He was lying about how bad things really were. He was showing investors a picture of a healthy building while the foundation was rotting underneath. I knew this pattern. I had seen it in construction. A contractor who hides a defective weld. An inspector who signs off on a pour that did not cure properly. Small lies that compound. Small failures that accumulate. Until one day the whole thing comes down and everyone acts surprised. But nobody should be. I could have pulled my investment then. Year 4. Before it got worse. But I did not. And the reason was the same reason I did not trigger page 19 when Derek first hit me. I needed the full picture. I needed the pattern to be complete. I needed enough weight on the structure that when I pulled my support, the collapse would be total. Not a crack. Not a lean. A complete structural failure. So I waited. I watched the quarterly reports grow more creative. I watched Derek's lifestyle inflate, even as his fund's real performance declined. The German sedan became a luxury SUV. The suits became custom. The weekends became ski trips and wine tastings. He was spending investor money on the appearance of success while the engine underneath was seizing. By year 5, the fund was essentially running on fumes and my capital. The 2.1 million from Bridgewater Silent Partners was not just 60% of the initial investment. It had become the ballast keeping the entire vessel from capsizing. Other investors had trickled in and out, but I was the constant. The silent foundation that Derek never knew existed, and that was precisely the point. When you are the foundation of a building, you have ultimate power. Not the power to hold it up, the power to let it fall. I was not a vengeful man. I did not invest $2.1 million in my son's fund as a trap. I invested it as a test. The same way the house was a test. I wanted to believe he would be honest. I wanted to believe he would succeed on merit. I wanted to see my son build something real. He failed that test the same way he failed every test I ever gave him. Not with a dramatic collapse, but with a slow, quiet rot that he covered with a fresh coat of paint every quarter. Now, lying in Sandra's guest bedroom at 3 a.m, I was not pulling my investment as punishment. I was pulling it as diagnosis. The building was already structurally unsound. I was simply removing the last support beam so the inspector could see the truth. When 60% of a fund's capital withdraws in 24 hours, it does not decline. It does not correct. It collapses. Like a bridge with the main cable severed. The roadway does not sag. It falls. And everything on it goes down together. By Friday afternoon, Derek would receive the redemption notice. By Friday evening, the other investors would hear rumors and file their own redemptions. By Monday morning, Summit Ridge Capital would be a name on a door that nobody would ever walk through again. 2 demolitions, synchronized to the hour. The house at 10 a.m., the fund at 2 p.m., both engineered by the same man, both invisible until the moment of impact. I was not a vengeful man, but I was an engineer. And sometimes the most merciful thing you can do to a condemned structure is bring it down quickly. Before it falls on someone innocent. Before it falls on Lily, I did not sleep. I lay in Sandra's guest bedroom staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind howl against the windows, and I waited for the sun. Sandra checked on me twice during the night. She brought me ibuprofen and warm broth. She did not ask questions. She was a nurse. She knew that some patients need silence more than they need conversation. At 5:45, the gray light of a Minnesota winter dawn began to seep through the curtains. The storm had weakened overnight. The wind had dropped from 40 miles per hour to 15. The temperature had climbed to -19, still lethal, but no longer apocalyptic. The plows had been running since 4. I could hear them scraping the streets in the distance, pushing the night's accumulation into dirty mountains along the curbs. I sat up. My body protested. Every joint was stiff. My fingers were swollen and tender from the frostbite that Sandra had managed to reverse before it became permanent. My face throbbed where Derek had grabbed me the week before. But my mind was clear, sharper than it had been in months. There is a clarity that comes with finality. When you stop wondering if, and start executing when. The fog lifts. My phone buzzed at 6:58. Walt. Good morning, Harold. Everything is in motion. I filed the violation notice with myself as trustee at 6:30. The evidence packet is attached. 18 months of footage, indexed and time-stamped. The transfer documents are executing now. Northland Asset Group will have legal title by 9 a.m. I closed my eyes. 9 a.m. 3 hours from now. Derek would be in his car by then, driving to work, listening to market updates on the radio, thinking about how to stop the bleeding at his fund. He would have no idea that the biggest hemorrhage was happening to his home. What about Victor? I asked. Victor has a team ready, Walt said. 2 security officers, 1 locksmith, 1 property manager with a clipboard and a camera to document the condition of the interior. They will arrive at 10 a.m. Standard procedure for a trust asset recovery. Professional, clean, legal. And if Megan is inside, she will be given 60 minutes to collect personal identification, prescription medications, and 1 bag of clothing. Everything else is trust property. She has no legal standing. Her name is on nothing. I thought about Megan. Her designer clothes, her jewelry, her closet that looked like a department store. All of it purchased with my pension money, redirected through Derek's accounts. All of it sitting in a house that would belong to someone else in 3 hours. What if she refuses to leave? I asked. Victor's team will contact the Adena Police Department, Walt said. They will present the deed, the transfer documents, and the revocation of occupancy. The police will escort her off the property. This is not an eviction, Harold. This is a trespass removal. She has no rights to contest. I exhaled slowly. Okay. What about the fund withdrawal? Filed at market open. 6:30 a.m. Central Time. The redemption notice is sitting in Summit Ridge Capital's compliance inbox right now. Derek will see it when he gets to his desk. Standard processing gives him 24 hours to liquidate positions and wire the funds. But Harold, when a notice that size hits a fund this small, word travels fast. His other investors will know by end of day. Good, I said. Let them know. I hung up. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my hands. They were rough, scarred. The hands of a man who had spent his life gripping steel and pouring concrete in weather that would break most men. These hands had built overpasses and highway spans and pedestrian bridges. Now they were going to dismantle one man's entire existence using nothing but paperwork and patience. Sandra knocked on the door at 7:15. She brought coffee and toast. She sat with me at her kitchen table while I ate. She did not press. She waited until I was ready. Sandra, I said, I need to ask you something. Anything, Harold. Can I stay here today? I need to be close. I need to see it. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. You can stay as long as you need. But Harold, are you sure you want to watch? I need to, I said. I need to see his face when the world he built on my back collapses. She did not judge me. She just refilled my coffee. At 8:15, I opened the security camera app on my phone. The same app I had used for 5 years. The same cameras I had installed when Derek moved in. He never changed the admin password. He never even knew I had access. It was the digital equivalent of leaving the front door unlocked while robbing the homeowner blind. The kitchen camera showed Megan making a smoothie. She was wearing yoga pants and a cashmere sweater. Her hair was pulled up. She looked relaxed, unbothered. The woman who had laughed while her husband threw a 72-year-old man into a blizzard was blending kale and thinking about her morning workout. The garage camera showed Derek's black SUV pulling out at 8:27. He backed down the driveway, turned onto Elm Court, and disappeared toward the highway. He was headed downtown, to his glass office on the 22nd floor, to his ergonomic chair and his Bloomberg terminal and the illusion of control. He kissed Megan before he left. I saw it on the hallway camera. A quick peck on the cheek. Routine. Mechanical. The kiss of a man who has already forgotten the person he is kissing. It was the last time he would walk out of that door as anything other than a stranger. I switched to the exterior camera. The driveway was empty now, except for Megan's white sedan. The street was quiet, plowed and salted. A normal Friday morning. In a wealthy suburb, where nothing bad ever happened. At 9:03, my phone buzzed. Walt. One word. Done. The house belonged to Northland Asset Group. Derek Mercer's name was nowhere on the deed. Megan Mercer's name was nowhere on the deed. They were occupying a property they had no legal right to enter. At 9:47, I saw the vehicles turn onto Elm Court through the exterior camera. A white locksmith van. Behind it, a black SUV with tinted windows. Northland Security printed on the door in small professional lettering. They moved slowly, deliberately. No sirens, no drama. Just two vehicles rolling up to a house on a quiet street, carrying the end of a man's world in their glove compartments. They parked in the driveway. I watched 4 people exit. 2 from the SUV, 1 from the van. one from a sedan that pulled up behind them. The locksmith carried a toolbox. The security officers wore black jackets with radio earpieces. The property manager held a clipboard and a folder thick with documents. They walked up the front steps. The same steps Derek had shoved me down 18 hours ago. The property manager rang the doorbell. I watched the kitchen camera. Megan looked up from her phone, frowned. She was not expecting anyone. She set down her smoothie and walked toward the front door. I put down my coffee cup. I leaned forward. The show was about to begin. I watched it all unfold on the 6-inch screen of my phone. Sitting at Sandra's kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand. The front door camera showed Megan opening the door. She was still holding her smoothie. Her expression shifted from mild annoyance to confusion in approximately 2 seconds. The property manager, a woman in a gray peacoat with a clipboard, spoke first. "Good morning. Are you Megan Mercer?" "Yes." "Who are you? What is this about?" The property manager extended the clipboard. "My name is Catherine Wells. I represent Northland Asset Group. As of 9:03 this morning, this property has been legally transferred to Northland Asset Group pursuant to the terms of the Mercer Family Irrevocable Trust. You are currently occupying private property without authorization." Megan blinked. The smoothie tilted slightly in her hand. "Excuse me? This is my house. My husband and I live here." Catherine did not flinch. Her voice remained level. "Professional. Ma'am, this property was never in your name, or your husband's name. It was held by a trust entity. That trust has exercised its right to transfer the asset to a successor entity. The transfer is complete. You have 60 minutes to collect personal identification documents, prescription medications, and 1 bag of essential clothing. After that time, you will be asked to vacate." Megan's face went through a sequence I will never forget. Confusion, disbelief, recognition, and then fury. Pure, white-hot fury. She threw the smoothie. The glass shattered against the porch railing, spraying green liquid across the snow. The security officers stepped forward, but did not touch her. They were trained. They waited. "This is insane," Megan screamed. "You cannot do this. My father-in-law lives here. He owns this house. Call him. Call Harold Mercer. He will tell you this is a mistake." Catherine looked at her clipboard. "Mr. Harold Mercer is the grantor of the trust that previously held this property. The trust has been triggered due to documented violations of the occupancy terms. Mr. Mercer is aware of and has authorized this transfer." I watched Megan's face on the screen. The moment the words landed, the moment she understood that this was not a mistake, this was not a glitch in the system, this was Harold, the old man from the basement. The dead weight, the stick she had thrown into the snow 12 hours ago. Her hand went to her phone. She dialed Derek. I could see her pacing the porch, pressing the phone to her ear, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. It rang, and went to voicemail. He was in a meeting. Of course he was. The captain was on the bridge while the ship was already underwater. She tried again. Voicemail. A third time. Voicemail. She turned back to Catherine. "I am calling the police," Megan declared, her voice shaking between rage and panic. "This is breaking and entering. You are criminals." "You are welcome to contact the police," Catherine said calmly. "We have all documentation ready for their review." Megan dialed 911. I watched her pace the driveway in her yoga pants and cashmere sweater. No coat. The temperature was -19. She did not seem to notice. Adrenaline has a way of making you forget the cold. I knew that from last night. The squad car arrived 11 minutes later. One officer. He was young, bundled in a heavy department-issued coat, his breath streaming in the air. He listened to Megan first. She was hysterical, pointing at the Northland team, shouting about trespassing and theft and her husband and her father-in-law. Then he walked up to Catherine. She handed him the folder. The deed. the trust, transfer, the revocation of occupancy, the signed agreement, with Derek's signature on page 43. The officer read it slowly. He radioed dispatch. He waited. 4 minutes later, he walked back to Megan. "Ma'am," he said. His voice was not unkind, but it was final. "The documentation is in order. This property has been legally transferred. You are not the owner. You are not on the lease. You have no legal right to be here." "But my things," Megan said. Her voice cracked. "My clothes. My jewelry. Everything I own is inside." The officer looked at Catherine. Catherine stepped forward. "Ma'am, you have been given 60 minutes. That time started when we knocked. You have 43 minutes remaining. I suggest you use them to gather your identification and anything you need for the next 24 hours. One carry-on bag." Megan looked at the officer. He nodded. "Go get your things, ma'am. But you need to be off the property by 10:47. She went inside. I switched to the interior cameras. I watched her run up the stairs. She was crying now. Ugly, panicked crying. She ran into the master bedroom. She pulled open drawers, grabbing handfuls of documents. Passport, birth certificate, social security card. She shoved them into her purse. Then she went to the closet. The walk-in closet that was bigger than my basement room. She stood in the doorway and looked at the rows of designer clothes. The shoes arranged by color. The handbags on their lit display shelves. She looked at it the way a captain looks at a sinking ship, knowing there is only one seat on the lifeboat. She grabbed a small rolling carry-on. She began pulling things off hangers. A coat. A sweater. Jeans. She reached for a handbag on the top shelf. A Chanel, by the look of it. She shoved it into the bag. Then another. Then she tried to zip the bag closed. It would not close. She screamed. A wordless, animal sound of frustration and loss. She kicked the closet door. Then she stood there, shoulders heaving, surrounded by $10,000 worth of fast fashion and designer labels that she would never touch again. At 10:44, the property manager knocked on the bedroom door. 3 minutes, ma'am." Megan walked out the front door at 10:46 with one carry-on bag, her purse, and a pair of sneakers she had forgotten to change out of her house slippers. The locksmith was already at work. He had the front deadbolt out and a new mechanism going in. The security officer stood at the base of the steps, hands folded, face blank. Megan stood on the sidewalk. The cold hit her immediately. She was wearing yoga pants, a cashmere sweater, and no coat. Her carry-on sat in the snow beside her. Her car keys were in her purse, but her white sedan was inside the garage, and the garage code had already been changed. She stood there, shivering, staring at the house. Her house. Except it was never her house. It was never Derek's house. It was mine. And now it was Northland's. And she was standing on a public sidewalk with a carry-on bag and a dead phone battery, watching a locksmith install the lock that would keep her out forever. I turned off the camera app. I set my phone down on Sandra's table. I picked up my coffee. It was cold. I drank it anyway. 12 hours ago, I had stood on that same porch. In that same cold. With less clothing and no bag and no warning. Derek and Megan had turned off the lights and gone to sleep while I froze. Now she knew how it felt. Not the temperature. The abandonment. The sudden, violent realization that the ground you were standing on was never yours to begin with. The mirror was complete. At 2:15 on that same Friday afternoon, while Megan was still sitting in the lobby of a Holiday Inn trying to charge her dead phone, the second detonation hit. I was not there to see it in person. I did not have cameras inside Derek's office. But Walt had contacts at the building. And the events were later documented in SEC filings, witness statements, and Derek's own frantic text messages that would be subpoenaed during the investigation. I can reconstruct it with precision. Summit Ridge Capital occupied a corner suite on the 22nd floor of the IDS Tower in downtown Minneapolis. Glass walls, views of the city, a Bloomberg terminal on every desk. It looked like success. It smelled like new carpet and imported coffee. Derek had chosen it specifically for the impression it made on clients. Image was everything in the fund world. If you looked profitable, people assumed you were. At 2:15, Derek was in his office reviewing the morning's trading activity. The fund had already been wounded by the 3 client redemptions earlier that week. He was trying to stem the bleeding, rebalancing positions, calling his prime broker, doing the financial equivalent of rearranging furniture on a tilting ship. His compliance officer knocked on the glass door. A thin man named Patterson, who wore wire-rimmed glasses and a permanent expression of concern. "Derek, we received a redemption notice." Derek did not look up from his screen. "Who?" "Bridgewater Silent Partners." Derek stopped typing. He knew that name. It was his largest investor. The anchor that had been there since day one. The silent entity from Delaware that never asked questions, never requested meetings, never did anything except send capital and collect quarterly statements. "How much?" Derek asked. "Full redemption. 2.1 million. They want it processed within standard terms. 24-hour liquidity window." Derek stood up. His chair rolled backward and hit the credenza. "That is 60% of our assets under management. We cannot liquidate that in 24 hours without crashing our positions." Patterson adjusted his glasses. "I am aware, but the partnership agreement gives them the right to standard redemption on 30-day rolling terms. They are within their contractual window. We cannot block it." "Get them on the phone," Derek said. His voice was climbing. "Now, get me whoever runs Bridgewater. I will talk to them. I will negotiate an extension, a partial redemption, anything." Patterson handed him the contact sheet. There was one phone number listed. Derek dialed it. It rang 4 times and went to a voicemail recording. "You have reached the offices of Bridgewater Silent Partners. Please leave a message." The voice on the recording was Walt Brennan's. But Derek had never met Walt. He had never heard his voice. He did not recognize it. He just heard a dead end. He tried again. Voicemail. A third time. Voicemail. He slammed the phone down. "Who are these people?" he muttered. 5 years they have been in my fund, and I have never once spoken to a human being. Not once. He was pacing now. I could picture it. The same pacing he did in the kitchen before he hit me. The same caged animal energy. The same building pressure, looking for a vent. Derek turned to Patterson. "Can we delay processing? Claim a technical issue? A compliance review?" Patterson shook his head. "If we fail to honor a valid redemption request within the stated liquidity window, we are in breach of our own operating agreement. The investor can file a complaint with the SEC, and given our current AUM, a 60% withdrawal will trigger automatic reporting thresholds." "Meaning what?" Derek snapped. "Meaning the SEC will open a preliminary inquiry. They will want to see our books. All of them. And Derek," Patterson said, lowering his voice, "if our reported returns do not match the actual trading records, we have a much bigger problem than one redemption." The room went cold. I imagine Derek felt it. The sudden understanding that the walls he had built with creative accounting and selective reporting were about to be examined by people who were paid to find cracks. He sat back down. He stared at the Bloomberg terminal. The numbers were red. His positions were already down for the day. If he liquidated 60% of the portfolio at current prices, the losses would be catastrophic. The remaining investors would receive updated NAV statements, showing a fund that had just lost half its value overnight. At 3:45, the first call came. Henderson Capital, a family office out of Wayzata that had invested $300,000. They had heard rumors. They wanted out. Full redemption, effective immediately. At 4:10, a second call. Lakeview Partners. 200,000. Same request. At 4:30, Patterson walked back into Derek's office. He did not knock this time. His face was gray. 3 more redemption requests just came in electronically. Total additional outflow is 900,000. Combined with Bridgewater, that is 3.1 million. Derek, that is 91% of our assets under management. Derek was sitting perfectly still. His hands were flat on the desk. His eyes were unfocused. The look of a man watching an avalanche descend toward him in slow motion, knowing there is no shelter and no time to run. What do we do? Patterson whispered. Derek did not answer. He was staring at the Bridgewater notice on his screen. The faceless entity from Delaware. The silent partner who had never spoken, never visited, never demanded, who had sat in his fund for 5 years like a ghost, and who had just pulled the pin on a grenade that would destroy everything. Who are you? Derek whispered to the screen. Who the hell are you? His phone rang. The screen showed Megan's name. He had missed her calls all morning. 6 missed calls he had ignored because he was busy trying to save his fund. He picked up. What? He said flatly. The sound that came through the speaker was barely human. Megan was screaming. Not angry, screaming. Terrified screaming. The kind of sound a person makes when the floor drops out beneath them. Derek. They took the house. They took everything. People came with locks and police and papers. They said the trust transferred the property. They kicked me out. I am standing outside with one bag. Derek, where is Harold? What did he do? What did your father do? Derek's hand tightened around the phone. His face went white. Not office white. Not bad quarter white. White like bone. White like a man who has just realized that 2 bullets were fired at the same time from 2 different directions, and both just hit their target. They took everything. 3 words. Megan's voice dissolved into static and sobbing. Derek slowly lowered the phone from his ear. He placed it face down on the desk. He looked at Patterson, who was still standing in the doorway, watching his boss implode. Go home, Patterson, Derek said quietly. There is nothing left to save here. He sat alone in his glass office. The city lights were beginning to flicker on as the winter afternoon faded to dusk. His fund was dead. His home was gone. And somewhere out there, the old man he had thrown into a blizzard was watching. Waiting. Planning whatever came next. Derek did not know it yet. But the worst was still coming. Derek drove like a man whose life was on fire. Because it was. He left the IDS tower at 5:07. He did not turn off his computer. He did not lock his office. He did not say goodbye to Patterson or the 2 junior analysts who were still at their desks, pretending not to notice that their boss had just watched his career evaporate in real time. He grabbed his coat, his keys, and his phone, and he walked to the elevator with the rigid posture of a man holding himself together by willpower alone. The drive from downtown Minneapolis to Edina takes 22 minutes in normal traffic. Derek made it in 14. He ran 2 red lights and took the crosstown highway exit at 60 miles per hour on roads that were still glazed with ice from the previous night's storm. I know this because the city traffic cameras captured his black SUV weaving through traffic like a man racing towards something that was already gone. I was still at Sandra's house. I had moved to the living room, which had a clear view of Elm Court through the front window. Sandra had drawn the curtains partway, leaving a gap just wide enough for me to watch the street. She brought me dinner. A bowl of tomato soup and a grilled cheese sandwich. I ate slowly. I was not hungry, but Sandra insisted. She was a nurse. She believed in maintenance, in keeping the body functional even when the mind was elsewhere. At 5:21, headlights swept across the window. Fast. Too fast for a residential street. I heard tires screech on the icy asphalt. Then the heavy crunch of a vehicle jumping the curb. I leaned forward. Through the gap in Sandra's curtains, I watched Derek's black SUV fishtail into the driveway of his former home. The front wheel mounted the snow-covered lawn. The headlights illuminated the front of the house, and in that harsh white beam, Derek saw what Megan had seen 8 hours earlier. New locks on the front door. A steel-gray deadbolt that had not been there yesterday. A printed notice taped to the glass panel beside the door. And a sign, small but unmistakable, staked in the front lawn where last night's snow had been cleared. Private property. No trespassing. Northland Asset Group. Derek sat in the car for almost 30 seconds. I counted. An engineer counts. Then the door flew open, and he launched himself out of the vehicle without turning off the engine. The driver's door hung open. The headlights stayed on. The exhaust poured white smoke into the frozen evening air. He ran to the front door. He pulled his keys from his pocket. He jammed the key into the lock. It did not fit. He tried again, forcing it, twisting. The metal scraped against metal. The key bent slightly. He stepped back and kicked the door. Once. Twice. The steel deadbolt did not budge. He ran to the garage. The keypad was dark. He punched his code. Nothing happened. He punched it again. Nothing. He ran to the side gate. Padlocked. He grabbed the fence and tried to haul himself over. His dress shoes slipped on the icy wood. He fell back into the snow, his expensive coat now soaked. That is when the security officer stepped out from the shadows of the front porch. He had been standing there the entire time. Patient. Silent. Waiting. Sir. The voice was deep and calm. You are on private property. Step back to the sidewalk. Derek spun around. Who the hell are you? This is my house. I live here. The officer did not raise his voice. He unfolded a laminated document from his vest pocket and held it up. This property is owned by Northland Asset Group as of 9:03 this morning. You are not authorized to be here. Step back to the sidewalk or I will contact the Adena Police Department. Derek's face was a mask I had never seen before. Not anger. Not sadness. Disorientation. The total cognitive collapse of a man whose internal map of reality no longer matches the territory. He looked at the sign on the lawn. He looked at the new locks. He looked at the security officer who was built like a concrete pillar. My father, Derek said. His voice was hoarse. Harold Mercer. He did this. He owns this house. It is a family trust. The officer shook his head slowly. Sir, the previous owner was a trust entity. That entity has transferred the property. Your name does not appear on any current ownership documents. I do not know the details. I just know you are not authorized to be here. Derek pulled out his phone. He dialed 911. His hand was shaking so badly, he nearly dropped it. He paced the driveway, leaving footprints in the thin layer of fresh snow, talking rapidly to the dispatcher. His voice was high, cracking, desperate. The squad car arrived in 9 minutes. A different officer than the one who had come for Megan that morning. This one was older, gray, at the temples. He had the demeanor of a man who had seen every variety of human desperation and was no longer impressed by any of it. He reviewed the documents. He made a radio call. He checked the county database on his cruiser's laptop, and then he walked back to Derek, who was standing in the middle of the driveway with his arms crossed, shivering in his now wet coat. Mr. Mercer, the officer said, the property records confirm a legal transfer this morning. You are not the owner. You have no lease agreement with the current owner. I understand this is difficult, but this is a civil matter. You will need to resolve it through the courts. Right now, I need you to leave the property. It is January, Derek said. His voice broke. It is 20 below zero. Where am I supposed to go? The officer's face softened slightly, but his posture did not change. I can provide you with information for emergency shelters in the metro area, sir. But you cannot remain on this property. Derek looked at the house one last time. His house. The house where he had hosted parties, where he had slept in a king-sized bed, where he had locked his father in a basement and stolen his pension and thrown him into a lethal storm without a second thought. Then he looked across the street. 3 houses down. Sandra's house. The living room light was on. The curtains were parted slightly, and through that gap, he saw me. I was standing at the window, my cane in my right hand, a cup of tea in my left. My face was bruised and swollen, lit from behind by Sandra's reading lamp. I was looking directly at him. Our eyes met across the frozen street. 30 yards of snow and silence between us. I did not wave. I did not smile. I did not nod. I just held his gaze. Steady. The way a bridge holds weight. Without expression. Without effort. Without giving an inch. He stared at me for a long time. 10 seconds. 15. His breath clouding in the dark air. His body shaking. Not from cold. From the understanding that was finally, irreversibly settling into his bones. I was still standing. After everything he had done to me, I was still standing. And he was the one out in the cold. He looked away first. He always would. They found each other in the parking lot of a Motel 6 off Interstate 494 inches Bloomington. I was not there. I did not need to be. My private investigator, a retired Hennepin County detective named Ruiz, whom Walt kept on retainer, filled in the details later from security footage and the night clerk's statement. But I knew Derek. I knew Megan. I could have written the script myself. The motel was the kind of place that accepted cash and did not ask for a credit card hold. $63 a night. Thin walls. A parking lot full of cars that had seen better decades. It was the kind of place where endings happen in fluorescent lighting. Derek arrived first. He paid with the $87 in cash left in his wallet. His credit cards were dead. Not declined. Dead. The accounts behind them no longer existed. The corporate American Express tied to Summit Ridge Capital had been frozen when Patterson initiated the fund's wind-down procedures. His personal Visa was maxed. The joint account he shared with Megan had been drained weeks ago to cover margin calls he never told her about. Megan arrived 40 minutes later. She had spent the afternoon at a Holiday Inn lobby charging her phone and calling every friend she had. None of them offered her a room. She was learning what I had learned 18 months ago, that the people who toast you at parties are not the people who shelter you in storms. She found Derek sitting on the edge of the bed in room 112. His coat was still wet. His shoes were muddy. He was staring at the wall, the way a man stares at a television that has been turned off. "What happened?" Megan said. Her voice was flat, exhausted. She stood in the doorway with her carry-on bag, taking in the room, the stained carpet, the polyester bedspread, the faint smell of industrial cleaner and old cigarettes. This was as far from Adina as a person could fall without leaving the metro area. "He did it," Derek said. He did not look at her. "My father. He sold the house out from under us. Some kind of clause in a trust I signed years ago. I did not read it. I did not know." Megan set her bag down. She sat in the single chair by the window. She did not sit on the bed. She did not sit near him. The distance was deliberate. "The fund," she said. "The client's pulling out." "That is him too?" Derek was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. "Has to be. The biggest investor pulled everything today. All at once. I never met them. Never spoke to them. Layer. I. Layer. A. End. I. End. A. End. 5 years and I never once talked to a real person at Bridgewater Silent Partners." "Bridgewater," Megan repeated. Her eyes narrowed. "Silent Partners." She let out a bitter laugh. "It is him. It has to be him. The old man was in your fund the whole time and you did not even know it." Derek put his head in his hands. "I did not know," he whispered. "How was I supposed to know?" Megan stood up. She walked to him. She did not touch him. She pulled his phone from his coat pocket. She opened his banking app. She forced his face in front of the screen to unlock it. She scrolled. I watched her face change in Ruiz's report. He described it as the expression of a woman doing mental arithmetic and arriving at zero. Where is the money? Megan said. Her voice had dropped to something dangerous. Quiet. Controlled. You told me we had savings. You told me the fund was growing. You told me your father was just supplementing. Where is the actual money, Derek? Gone, he said. Gone where? Margin calls. Client redemptions. Operating costs. He was listing them like a man reading his own autopsy report. The fund was underperforming for 2 years. I was covering the gaps with new investor capital. Megan stepped back. You were running a Ponzi scheme. It was not a Ponzi scheme, Derek snapped, finally looking up. It was a liquidity management strategy that got out of hand. You were using new money to pay old promises, Megan said coldly. That is the definition. And your father's money was the largest piece. He was subsidizing your fraud. Derek had no response. He stared at the floor. Megan opened the closet. There was nothing inside except a Bible and an iron. She pulled her carry-on onto the bed and unzipped it. She began going through what she had managed to grab. 2 sweaters, a pair of jeans, sneakers, her passport, and a small velvet pouch that she had grabbed from her jewelry drawer in the 60-minute scramble. She opened it. Inside were 3 pieces: a diamond tennis bracelet, a pair of sapphire earrings, and her engagement ring, which she had taken off months ago because it no longer fit over her knuckle. She held the bracelet up to the light. Then she looked at Derek. This is real, right? The bracelet you gave me for our anniversary. You said it was 4 carats. You said it was $12,000. Derek did not answer. His silence was louder than any confession. Megan looked at the bracelet more carefully. She turned it over. She found the tiny stamp on the clasp. She held it under the bedside lamp. The abbreviation was small, but clear. CZ, cubic zirconia. She checked the earrings. Same stamp. She checked the ring. Same. Her face did not crumble. It hardened. Something behind her eyes went dark and permanent, like a door slamming shut in a house that would never be reopened. You are a fraud, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Everything about you is fake. The fund, the house, the jewelry. You gave me glass and told me it was diamonds. Megan, please. Derek reached for her hand. She pulled away. She zipped her carry-on closed. She picked up her purse. She pulled out the car keys to her white sedan and then stopped. The sedan was locked in a garage with a new code she did not have. She looked at Derek. Give me your keys. What? Your car keys. The SUV. Give them to me. That is my car, Megan. It is leased, she said. Under your father's company. It does not belong to you any more than the house did. But right now, tonight, I need transportation, and you owe me that. Give me the keys, or I will call every contact in your fund's investor list and tell them exactly what liquidity management strategy means. Derek reached into his coat. He pulled out the key fob. He handed it to her. His hand was shaking. Megan took it without a word. She picked up her bag. She walked to the door. She put her hand on the handle. She did not look back. Where are you going? Derek asked. His voice was small. A child's voice. Away from you, she said. And then she was gone. The door clicked, shut behind her, with the soft finality of an ending that had been written long before it was performed. Derek sat alone on the motel bed. The room was silent except for the hum of the heater and the distant sound of traffic on the interstate. He looked at the velvet pouch on the bedspread. The fake diamonds glittered under the cheap light. He picked up the ring, held it between his fingers. Cubic, Zirconia. A perfect imitation of something valuable. Worthless. The moment someone looked closely enough. His entire life was cubic zirconia. The fund built on fraud. The house built on a trust he never read. The marriage built on a lie. The career built on his father's invisible money, all of it glass masquerading as diamond. And now the jeweler had arrived with his loupe. And there was nowhere left to hide the flaws. Saturday and Sunday passed like a funeral procession without a body. 2 days of silence so heavy it had weight. 2 days in which my son disintegrated, and I prepared the final nail. I spent those 2 days at Sandra's house. She refused to let me leave until the bruises faded and my fingers regained full sensation. She was right. The frostbite had come close to permanent damage on my left hand. The tips of my ring finger and pinky were still numb. They would stay that way for months. A reminder written in nerve damage of what my son had done. But while my body healed, my mind was at work. Saturday morning, Walt arrived at Sandra's house in person for the first time. He drove up from his townhouse in Minnetonka in a silver Volvo that was older than Derek. He carried a leather briefcase that weighed approximately 15 pounds. I know, because I lifted it when he set it on Sandra's dining room table. 15 pounds of evidence, 15 pounds of truth. We spent 4 hours at that table. Walt had organized the footage from the Kane's cloud server into a chronological index. 212 incidents, each one labeled with a date, a time, a duration, and a brief description. He had printed screenshots of the most damning moments. Freeze frames that showed Derek's hand raised. Derek's face twisted in rage. My face, bruised and passive. Megan's phone recording from the background. It was strange seeing it laid out like that. Clinical. Organized. 18 months of pain reduced to paper and timestamps. Each incident was small on its own. A shove here, an insult there, a meal withheld. A phone line cut, but stacked together, arranged in sequence. They told a story that no jury could misinterpret. A story of systematic, deliberate, escalating abuse. Harold, Walt said, pulling a separate folder from his briefcase. I spoke with Janet Okafor at the Hennepin County Attorney's Office yesterday afternoon. She is an assistant district attorney who specializes in elder abuse cases. I sent her a preliminary packet, 12 incidents. A sample. What did she say? Walt paused. He removed his glasses and cleaned them with his handkerchief, a habit he had when delivering significant information. She said it was one of the most disturbing patterns of elder abuse she has reviewed in 14 years of prosecution. She wants the full file. She wants to meet with you Monday morning. And Harold. She said something else. What? She said given the footage from January 17th, specifically the ejection into lethal weather conditions without adequate clothing, she is considering charges beyond standard elder abuse. She is looking at attempted murder by depraved indifference. I sat with that. Attempted murder. My son. The boy who used to fall asleep on my chest watching Saturday morning cartoons. Attempted murder. Do you want to proceed? Walt asked gently. I looked at my left hand. The numb fingers. The skin still discolored from the frostbite. I thought about lying face down on that sidewalk, the snow piling on my back, my consciousness fading. If Sandra had not let her dog out at that exact moment, I would have died. My son would have killed me. Not with a gun, not with a knife, with a deadbolt, and 20 degrees below zero. Yes, I said. Proceed. Walt nodded. He pulled out another document. This is the formal complaint. Victim statement. I need you to read it, make corrections, and sign. We file Monday morning at 8 a.m. I read it. It was my life in legal language. Stripped of emotion. Reduced to facts and dates and injuries. It was accurate. It was devastating. I signed it. While I was building my case, Derek was destroying himself. I know what happened to him that weekend. Because Ruiz was watching, not physically following. That would have been illegal. But monitoring. The digital breadcrumbs a desperate man leaves when he is drowning. Derek called me 47 times between Friday night and Sunday evening. I know because my phone logged every attempt. Each one went to voicemail. He left messages. The first 10 were angry. "Dad, what the hell did you do? Call me back. This is insane. You cannot just steal my house. I am going to sue you. I am going to destroy you." The next 15 were bargaining. "Dad, please. Let us talk about this. I know I messed up. I was drunk. I was stressed. It will never happen again. Just call me back. We can work this out. I will sign whatever you want." The last 22 were begging. "Dad, I am in a motel." Megan left. "My cards do not work. I have not eaten since yesterday. Please. Dad, I am your son. I am sorry. I am so sorry. Please, just call me back. I have nowhere to go. Please." I listened to none of them in real time. I listened to them later, when Walt subpoenaed the voicemail records for the prosecution file. Hearing them then, weeks after the fact, in the sterile environment of a lawyer's office, they sounded exactly like what they were. The howling of a man who had been told no for the first time in his life and could not comprehend a world where no meant no. He tried other numbers too. His college roommate in Chicago. Voicemail. His former business partner in Denver. Number disconnected. 3 friends from his country club. All 3 calls went unanswered. One sent a text back. "Heard about the fund. Sorry, man. Cannot get involved." The architecture of Derek's social life was identical to the architecture of his fund. Built on appearances. Sustained by other people's resources. The moment the resources disappeared, the structure collapsed. He had no real friends. He had networking contacts. He had drinking companions. He had people who were happy to attend his parties and vanish at the first sign of trouble. By Sunday evening, Derek had stopped calling. His phone was nearly dead, and he had no charger. The motel's front desk had asked him to pay for a second night or vacate. He paid, with the last of his cash. $37. He would be broke by morning. I sat in Sandra's guest room that Sunday night. The house was quiet. Sandra was reading in the living room. I could hear the soft turning of pages through the wall. Outside, the temperature had risen to a balmy -7, almost tropical by that week's standards. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. Monday morning, I would put on the best suit Sandra had retrieved from my suitcase, which a neighbor had found half buried in the snow 2 blocks from Derek's house. I would pick up my cane. I would get into the car Walt was sending, and I would walk into the Hennepin County Attorney's office to hand them 18 months of evidence that would put my son in a cell. The cell that would, paradoxically, save his life. Because a man with no money, no home, and no friends who owes nothing to the legal system is a man who disappears. But a man in custody is a man who cannot be touched by the people he owes. Prison was not just punishment. It was protection. I turned off the light. I lay in the dark. I did not feel guilt. I did not feel triumph. I felt the steady, mechanical certainty of a structure performing exactly as designed. The load had been released. The bridge was holding, and tomorrow, the condemned building would finally be brought down. Monday morning, I put on my best suit, navy blue, single-breasted, the one Ruth bought me for our 40th anniversary. I knotted my tie in Sandra's bathroom mirror. My left fingers were still numb, but I managed. I had tied 10,000 knots in my career. Rebar knots, rigging knots. A necktie was nothing. I looked at my face. The bruises had shifted from purple to yellow-green. The split on my lower lip had scabbed over. I looked like a man who had survived something, which was accurate. I picked up my cane. 64 gigabytes. 18 months. 212 incidents. All uploaded. All indexed. All admissible. This piece of hickory was the most important witness in the state of Minnesota. Walt's car arrived at 7:15. He was in the back seat, wearing his courtroom suit. Sharp. For 78. "How are you feeling?" he asked as I settled in. "Like an engineer on demolition day," I said. The Hennepin County Government Center was a brutalist concrete tower downtown. Functional, no pretense, just purpose. We took the elevator to the 4th floor. Assistant District Attorney Janet Okafor met us in the hallway. Tall. Mid-40s. Frameless glasses. A handshake that meant business. The conference room had a large screen on the wall. Detective Chen was already seated. Younger than me. Older than Derek. Notepad open. No smile. Janet connected Walt's drive to the screen. 212 entries appeared. Each one a date, time, and thumbnail. January 17th, Janet said. "Let us start there." The screen filled with footage from my cane. The low angle, looking up at Derek's flushed face. The kitchen lights. Megan in the background. The audio was crystal clear. They watched the full sequence. The demand for power of attorney. My refusal. The grab. The shove. The suitcase packed with violent hands. The front door thrown open. Derek's hand on my chest pushing me into -35 degrees. Megan throwing my cane after me. The deadbolt clicking shut. Silence when it ended. Chen had stopped writing. The final frame showed the closed door from outside. Snow falling. Timestamp. 7:51 p.m. Temperature overlay in the corner. -35. "Mr. Mercer," Janet said. "At that temperature, how long could a person survive?" 45 minutes, I said. I was found at approximately that threshold. My core temperature was 93 degrees. 2. Lower and cardiac arrest begins. Janet looked at Chen. He nodded. "This is not elder abuse," Chen said quietly. "This is attempted murder by depraved indifference." He knew the temperature. He removed the victim's means of survival and locked the door. "That is intent." Janet stood. "I am taking this to Judge Morrison. Warrant within the hour. Detective. Coordinate with patrol. Clean arrest. No standoff." Chen dialed dispatch. "I need a locate on Derek Mercer. Last known Motel 6 Bloomington. If moved, check coffee shops and public Wi-Fi locations. Uptown and Lynn Lake corridor. Subject is without transportation and low on funds." At 9:43, Chen's phone rang. He listened. Nodded. "Located. Spy House Coffee on Hennepin Avenue. Inside using Wi-Fi. Unit is 3 minutes out." I stood up. "I want to be there," I said. "Not to intervene, just to see the end." Janet looked at Walt. Walt looked at me. He nodded. 15 minutes later, I stood on the opposite sidewalk of Hennepin Avenue, leaning on my cane in the cold January sun. Through the plate glass window of the coffee shop, I could see Derek hunched at a corner table. Unshaven. Same clothes from Friday. A cup of coffee untouched beside him. He was staring at a laptop screen, with the hollow focus of a man searching for something that no longer existed. The squad car pulled up. No sirens. No lights. 2 officers stepped out and walked into the shop like customers. I watched through the glass. The first officer approached Derek's table. Derek looked up, confused. Then recognition. Then terror. His face drained of color. His hands went flat on the table. "Stand up. Hands behind your back." Derek stood, shaking. The officer turned him and applied the cuffs. Click. Click. 2 small metallic sounds, like deadbolts. They walked him out, past the staring customers, onto the sidewalk, toward the cruiser. Derek looked across the street. He saw me. I was standing still, cane in my right hand, left hand in my coat pocket. The sun cast my shadow long across the snow. I was not smiling. I was not frowning. I was simply there, present, upright, alive. Our eyes locked across 30 feet of frozen air. I watched the understanding settle into his face. Not anger, not betrayal, recognition. He saw what I was, not a victim. An engineer who had designed this moment with the same patience and precision he used to design bridges. I touched my left wrist with my right hand. Where the bruises had been. Where he had grabbed me 100 times. A small gesture. His eyes followed it. I saw the connection land. He knew. Every incident, every recording, every day of endurance had been deliberate. He had never been in control. Not once in 18 months. The officer guided his head into the back seat. The door closed. The cruiser pulled into traffic and disappeared around the corner. I looked down at my cane. I tapped it once on the sidewalk. Sharp. Clean. Final. Like a gavel. 3 weeks later, the Hennepin County Courthouse smelled of marble and consequences. It was a building designed to hold weight. The weight of decisions. The weight of verdicts. The weight of lives being measured on a scale that does not care about bloodlines or birthdays or the promises fathers make to infant sons in hospital rooms. I sat in the third row behind the prosecution table. Walt was beside me. Sandra was 2 rows back. She had insisted on coming. She said she wanted to see it through. I think she wanted to make sure I did not sit alone. The courtroom was half full. Not with family. Derek had no family left who would come. Not with friends. His networking contacts had evaporated the moment the SEC inquiry became public. The gallery held reporters, law students, and the kind of people who attend trials the way others attend theater. For the drama, the side door opened at 9:15. Derek shuffled in wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on his frame. He had lost weight. His face was gaunt, unshaven. His wrists were shackled to a chain around his waist. His ankles were linked by a short length of steel that forced him to take small, shuffling steps. The sound of the chains was rhythmic, mechanical, like a metronome counting down. He did not look at the gallery. He kept his eyes on the floor as the bailiff guided him to the defense table. A public defender sat waiting, a young woman with tired eyes and a stack of files too tall for one person to manage effectively. She had been assigned the case 4 days ago. She was doing her best, with a hand that could not be won. The judge entered. The Honorable Patricia Morrison. Silver hair. Steady gaze. 31 years on the bench. She had seen everything. Her expression suggested that what she was about to see today would still find a way to disturb her. "All rise," the bailiff called. We rose. We sat. The machinery of justice began to turn. Janet Okafor stood. She was precise, methodical. She laid out the charges like an engineer presenting a structural report. Each count was a beam. Each piece of evidence was a rivet. Together, they formed a structure that could not be dismantled. Count 1. Attempted murder by depraved indifference. On January 17th, the defendant forcibly removed a 72-year-old man from a heated dwelling into outdoor conditions of -35 degrees Fahrenheit without adequate clothing, shelter, or means of communication. The defendant locked the door and extinguished all lights. Medical evidence confirms the victim was within minutes of fatal cardiac arrest when discovered by a neighbor. Count 2. Aggravated elder abuse. Over a period of 18 months, the defendant engaged in a systematic pattern of physical violence, verbal degradation, isolation, and confinement against his 72-year-old father, who resided in the defendant's home. Count 3. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The defendant redirected the victim's federal pension of $4,200 monthly into accounts controlled solely by the defendant, without the victim's knowledge or consent, for a period of 14 months. Total amount diverted, $58,800. Count 4. Identity theft. The defendant used the victim's personal identification documents to execute unauthorized financial transactions. Janet paused. She looked at the jury. 12 faces. 12 strangers who would decide my son's future. The state will present video evidence. Janet continued. 212 separate incidents captured by a concealed recording device over 18 months. The jury will see the escalation from verbal abuse to physical violence to attempted homicide. The evidence is unambiguous. It is continuous. And it is devastating. The public defender attempted her case. She spoke of stress, of financial pressure, of a family dispute that escalated beyond reason. She used the word mistake 17 times. She used the word regret 23 times. She never used the word sorry, because Derek had not said sorry. Not once during the proceedings. Not to me. Not to the court. Not to anyone. The video was played. Not all 212 incidents. Janet selected 14. A curated progression. Month 4, Month 7, Month 10, Month 13, Month 16, and January 17th. The jury watched in silence. Some turned away. One woman in the back row put her hand over her mouth. A man in the front row gripped the armrest of his chair until his knuckles went white. When the January 17th footage played, the courtroom went completely still. The sound of Derek screaming, "You are dead weight," through the speakers. The sound of my body hitting the wall. The sound of the suitcase being thrown. The sound of the Arctic wind roaring through the open door. The sound of the deadbolt. And then, silence. Snow. Darkness. -35. The judge called a 15-minute recess after that. I think she needed it. I think everyone did. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Not because the verdict was uncertain, but because the charges were numerous and the sentencing recommendations required discussion. They returned at 3:47 p.m. Guilty. All counts. Derek did not react. He sat motionless. His public defender put a hand on his shoulder. He did not acknowledge it. Judge Morrison scheduled sentencing for the following week. When that day came, she spoke before announcing the number. Her voice was measured, but carried the weight of genuine revulsion. "Mr. Mercer," she said, addressing Derek directly. "In 31 years on this bench, I have presided over cases of extraordinary cruelty, but I have rarely encountered cruelty this calculated, this sustained, and this intimate. You did not harm a stranger. You harmed the man who gave you life. You did not act in a moment of passion. You acted over 18 months of deliberate, escalating abuse. And when you ejected your father into conditions that would have killed him within the hour, you did not call for help. You turned off the lights and went to sleep." She paused. The courtroom was silent. "The court sentences you to 12 years in the Minnesota Correctional Facility at Stillwater. No possibility of early release for the attempted murder charge. Additionally, full restitution of $58,800 to the victim and a lifetime no-contact order." The gavel fell. The sound echoed through the marble room. Derek stood. The bailiff took his arm. The chains clinked as he shuffled toward the side door. At the threshold, he stopped. He turned his head, just slightly, enough to look over his shoulder at the gallery. His eyes found mine. For 1 second. 2. 3. I did not look away. I did not nod. I did not cry. I just held his gaze the way a bridge holds traffic. Without strain. Without drama. Performing exactly as designed. Then he turned away. The door closed behind him. The chains went silent. I stood up. My knees ached. My cane took the weight. Walt put a hand on my shoulder. Sandra was crying quietly 2 rows back. I walked out of the courthouse into the cold January air. But for the first time in years, the cold did not hurt. It felt clean. It felt like the space between the end of something rotten and the beginning of something real. 8 months later, the snow was gone. So was the weight I had carried for 2 years. It was September. The Minnesota autumn had arrived in its quiet, golden way. The maples along the river were turning amber and rust. The air smelled of dry leaves and wood smoke. I was standing in my workshop, a converted garage behind a small rambler I had rented in St. Paul, watching a 19-year-old kid named Marcus try to read a structural blueprint for the first time. He was holding it upside down. "Flip it, Marcus," I said. "The foundation goes at the bottom. Always start from the ground up." He laughed, turned the paper around, squinted at the lines. I could see the focus settling into his face. The same focus I had seen in young apprentices 40 years ago on job sites. The hunger to understand. The willingness to be taught. I had started the workshop in July. 4 kids from a transitional housing program in the East Side neighborhood. All between 18 and 22. All without fathers. All without direction. I taught them to read blueprints. To measure loads. To calculate tolerances. I taught them that precision is not perfectionism. It is respect. Respect for the materials. Respect for the people who will depend on what you build. I was not saving them. I was not that arrogant. I was just showing them that a man with rough hands and patience could build something that outlasts him. That the world respects people who can make things hold. My tablet chimed on the workbench at 10:15. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and swiped the screen. Lily's face filled the frame. 9 years old. Brown eyes. A gap where her left canine used to be. She was grinning so wide it looked like her face might split. "Grandpa," she shouted. "I got an A on my bridge project. Mrs. Henderson said it was the best one in the class. She said the truss design was advanced for 4th grade. I felt something warm spread through my chest. The kind of warmth that does not come from radiators or coffee. "Let me see it," I said. She held up a model bridge made of popsicle sticks and white glue. It was small. It was imperfect. The joints were uneven, and the deck sagged slightly to the left. But the truss pattern was correct. She had remembered what I showed her over video call 3 weeks ago. The triangular distribution of force. The way tension and compression work together to hold weight. "That is beautiful work, Lily," I said. "You know what makes a good bridge?" She shook her head. "It is not how pretty it looks. It is how much it can carry. You build something that holds, and that is worth more than anything that just looks nice." She smiled. "I love you, Grandpa. I love you too, kid. More than all the bridges in Minnesota." She waved. The screen went dark. I stood there for a moment in the quiet of my workshop. The sawdust in the air caught the sunlight from the window. Marcus and the other kids were on a break outside, eating sandwiches on the tailgate of my truck. I could hear them laughing. Young laughter. The kind that has not yet learned to be afraid of the future. I walked to the window and looked out. The world was still turning. The leaves were still falling. And I was still here. 72 years old with numb fingertips and a scar on my lip and a heart that had been broken and rebuilt like a bridge after a flood. Damaged but functional. Scarred but standing. Derek wrote me letters. One every week from Stillwater. I recognized the handwriting on the envelopes. Small, cramped. The penmanship of a man with too much time and too small a desk. I did not open them. I put them in the top drawer of my workbench. Not in a shredder. I was not ready to read them. I might never be. But I was not ready to destroy them either. That drawer was its own kind of trust, holding something I could not yet face, waiting for a day that might never come. Megan was in Milwaukee, working as a receptionist at a dental office. Ruiz had sent me a photo in August. She looked different, thinner, older. No designer clothes. No perfect blowout. Just a woman in sensible shoes learning that the world does not give you things for being pretty. it gives you things for showing up. The Adina house was gone. Demolished in March. The lot sat empty now, surrounded by construction fencing. A sign announced a future development. Townhomes. Affordable. I did not know if that was ironic or poetic. Maybe both. I drove past it once. In April. I slowed down and looked at the empty ground where my son had locked me in a basement and stolen my pension and thrown me into a killing storm. There was nothing left. Just dirt and gravel. And the faint rectangular impression where the foundation had been. Even that would be gone once they graded the lot. A foundation is only as strong as the people who stand on it. I had learned that the hard way. But I had also learned something else. Something God had been trying to teach me for years while I was too busy pouring concrete and writing checks to listen. Boundaries are not punishment. They are stewardship. They are the load release clause that God builds into every human heart. The mechanism that says, this is where my responsibility ends and yours begins. I had confused love with rescue for 38 years. I had confused generosity with duty. I had confused silence with peace. And those confusions had nearly killed me. God did not ask me to save Derek. God asked me to survive him. And then God asked me to build something new on the ground that was left. Something smaller. Something honest. Something that holds. I walked back to the workbench. Marcus and the crew were filing back in. They picked up their pencils and their rulers and their blueprint sheets. They bent over the paper with the concentration of people learning a new language, the language of structure, of support, of things that last. I picked up my cane and leaned it against the wall. I did not need it to walk anymore. The limp had faded. The numbness in my fingers had mostly resolved, but I kept the cane close. Not as a reminder of pain, as a reminder of patience, of what it means to wait for the right moment, of what it costs to stand still when every nerve is screaming at you to run. If this story reached your heart, I ask you one thing. Look at the people around you. Look at how they treat the ones who cannot fight back. And then decide what kind of foundation you are building. Are you building something that holds? Or are you building something that looks good from the outside, but collapses the moment real weight is applied? God sees the foundation. God sees what is hidden beneath the surface. Trust Him when your instincts whisper that something is wrong. Listen when respect is broken. And never let anyone convince you that enduring abuse is the same as showing love. If this resonated with you, tell me in the comments what you would have done differently. Share this with someone who might need to hear it today. And if you want more stories like this, consider subscribing. I read every comment. Every single one. Thank you for staying with me to the end. My name is Harold. My cane is still in the corner. And I am still building.